The desert sun blazed mercilessly, its heat pressing down like a curse. Somewhere in the endless stretch of dust and silence, a woman lay helpless, her body buried up to her neck in sand. The coyotes had already begun circling, their hungry eyes fixed on her. Her voice was gone, her hope fading fast. No one was supposed to find her out here. And yet, against all odds, one man appeared on the horizon. A lone cowboy, calloused hands and weathered boots carrying the weight of grit and justice. What he saw would test the very limits of human endurance and courage. The woman's ordeal began with cruelty. She was no stranger to hardship, but nothing had prepared her for this. Stripped of dignity, thrown into the pitiless desert, she had been left to die as punishment for nothing more than her defiance. Buried to her neck, her body was a prison of sand, her skin scorched under the unrelenting sky. Each breath filled her mouth with grit. Every moment stretched into eternity. She had been silenced, condemned, discarded. The desert is not forgiving. Rattlesnakes slither unseen. Vultures drift lazily in the heat, waiting for their meal. But the most immediate threat came from the coyotes, lean, patient, and merciless. They knew weakness when they saw it, and they could smell it in the trembling of her chest, in the shallow rise and fall of her breath. Miles away, a cowboy rode a weathered horse through the dry expanse. His life was built on hardship, too. Days of endless work, nights under star-heavy skies. He wasn't searching for trouble, but trouble had a way of finding men like him. Men who refused to look away when the world revealed its ugliness. And so, when his eyes caught a flicker of movement against the pale sand, when he saw the circling coyotes and the desperate, sunburned face straining against the earth, he knew this was no accident. Someone had done this. Someone had buried her alive. The cowboy dismounted slowly, his boots crunching against the cracked earth. The coyotes growled low, torn between fear and hunger, before retreating just beyond reach. Their patience was endless. They would wait. But he had no time to waste. The woman's lips were cracked, her voice nearly gone, but her eyes, sunken though they were, pleaded without words. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands clawing at the sand. It was hot, dry, and packed tight around her body. Every handful he dug seemed to collapse back in, as though the desert itself wanted to hold her prisoner. Sweat poured down his face, mixing with dust until his skin stung. His fingers bled from scraping against stone, but he didn't stop. Each layer he removed revealed more of her, inch by inch, as if pulling life back from the grave. The sun climbed higher. The horizon shimmered with heat. Still he dug. His breath grew ragged, his muscles screamed, but grit carried him where strength faltered. He had seen injustice before, in saloons, in fields, in towns that turned their backs on the weak. But this was cruelty stripped bare. Whoever had buried her here had meant for her to suffer, to vanish into silence. The coyotes crept closer again, their yellow eyes glowing in the heat. The cowboy reached for a stone and hurled it, sending them scattering with yelps. Then he returned to the work, fingers raw, arms shaking, time blurred. For the woman, each second was a fight to stay conscious. For the cowboy, each second was a war against exhaustion and despair. But little by little, the prison of sand loosened. He freed her shoulders, then her arms, finally her torso. He slid his arms beneath her and pulled her from the earth, her body trembling like a fragile bird's. The moment she was free, her head fell against his chest, her breath shallow and rattling. The coyotes, sensing weakness, began to close in once more, their hunger outweighing their fear. The cowboy, still heaving from his labor, stood between them and her. His body was a wall, his hands clenched into fists that were already bruised and bleeding. He let out a guttural roar, hurling another rock, then another, until the coyotes finally retreated into the desert shadows. But the fight wasn't over. She was half-conscious, barely clinging to life, and the desert was vast. If he didn't move fast, her freedom would mean nothing. With raw determination, he lifted her into his arms. Her weight was nothing compared to the weight of the injustice he had just witnessed. Step by step, he carried her back to his horse, mounted with her slumped against him, and set out toward the distant line of mountains, toward water, toward shelter, toward hope. The sun was merciless, the journey brutal, but the cowboy's grit was iron. He had pulled her from the grave once already, and he would not let her slip back into it now. By the time they reached shelter, the woman's breath had steadied. Her body was broken, her spirit battered, but she lived. She had been left for dead, written off as nothing more than prey for the coyotes. Yet here she was, alive, because one man refused to walk away. The cowboy asked no questions, demanded no thanks. For him, the act itself was the reward. He had seen cruelty, and he had answered it with courage. That was the code he lived by, not written on paper, not bound by law, but etched into his very being. Injustice thrives when good people turn their heads. But when even one soul stands against it, when even one set of raw, bleeding hands digs through the earth to rescue another, darkness loses its grip. The desert still carries scars of that day, though the wind may erase them with time. But the story endures. A woman once buried alive walked again beneath the sky. A cowboy's grit defied cruelty itself. And so the question remains, when the world buries others under the weight of cruelty and injustice, will we have the grit to dig them out?